Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about this Islamabad Security Dialogue. As we all know, whenever the government or the state machinery prepares a document that we call national security document or a national security policy, there are a lot of very interesting aspects associated to it. Primarily, we always believe that this is more about the war that has claimed so many lives. But interestingly, there are so many other aspects. You talk about water security in the country. Obviously, why is Kashmir important? Why are those rivers important? Why do we need to have dams? Not only to generate electricity or power for that matter, but also to store water, as these are the major huge complexes where they can store the water for the needy times. You talk about food security. I think that is another very important aspect that is also related to water, but it has got a couple of other dynamics as well. Then you talk about climate change. Isn't it a threat? I think Pakistan is among those top 7 countries which have maximum climate threat. Climate change, global warming, so many Maldives for that matter, certain areas of New York, Holland, perhaps Bangladesh, they are under threat. Then there are other aspects associated to it, and we'll definitely be talking to you about it. But since today, the Prime Minister addressed Islamabad Security Dialogue Forum, and he also mentioned about various aspects of that. So he said that national security is also about non-traditional issues like climate change and food security, which threaten Pakistan and its overall security, as I earlier mentioned in the beginning of our program. Further states that national security cannot be envisaged in a country where there are a few rich people and a sea of poor people. Prime Minister said that Pakistan is committed to do everything it can to facilitate Afghan peace process, and further mentioned that China has brought out 700 million people from the poverty line. Addressed the participants, and he stated that a nation at peace and a region in harmony are essential prerequisites for attainment of national security in the true spirit. Chief said that it is important to understand that without the resolution of the Kashmir dispute through peaceful means, process of subcontinental rapprochement will always remain susceptible to derailment due to politically motivated bellicosity. Chief further said that we feel it is time to bury the past and move forward. Our neighbor will have to create a conducive environment, particularly in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And he further stated that today the leading drivers of change in the world are demography, economy and technology. This is a very strategy, innovation, invention and demography when it comes to countries like Japan for that matter. The overall age is very high. I mean, you talk about the aging population. Over here in Pakistan or a country like Saudi Arabia, where 65 to 70% of the population is under the age of 30. So that's a young nation. And when you talk about economy, I think economy is the name of the game. Countries like USSR now, which is Russia, and lost so many other countries, and so many other countries were formed after the collapse just because of the economy. But countries as small as Singapore perhaps is maintaining I think a brilliant economy since the last so many decades, highest per capita income in so many aspects, and look at the way. So that is something very crucial to our studio. On my right is Syed Mohammed Ali Saab. He's the Director, Strategic Affairs, CASS. Thank you so much for your time. And we'll also be talking to Lieutenant General Retired Talat Masood Saab, who's a Senior Analyst. And let me put the first question to you regarding Syed Mohammed Ali. You were also a part of this particular dialogue. Let's talk about the basic ingredients which were discussed as far as the speeches of the Prime Minister or the Chief of Army Staff is concerned. And let's debate, because whenever we talk about the national security, interestingly, it seems that either the focus is about the borders, safeguarding your frontiers, and the second is your internal security. Because a lot of senior politicians as well as senior bureaucrats, they believe that it is your internal policy that eventually leads into your foreign policy. So I think
today this Islamabad Security Dialogue is an exceptional and unprecedented event in the history of Pakistan's policy process for 3 reasons. Number one, I think we must recognize that the institution of National Security Division is also evolving with time, and despite changes in government, it seems to have sort of established itself and is led by a young scholar, and his fresh ideas are manifested in the form of the first ever Islamabad Security Dialogue. So before I come to the specific issues and the policy, what I want to highlight is that what does this dialogue mean? What is its significance? Three things. Number one, offensive. As you rightly pointed out in your introduction, five key elements on which not just the state sovereignty, territorial integrity, defense, but also the quality of life of the people, the health of the citizens, the environment, the economic security, all these dimensions were discussed and appreciated for the first time in a comprehensive manner. So Pakistan is reconceptualizing the concept of national security in a more comprehensive manner. So this itself is a huge achievement. Secondly, which institutions, stakeholders and individuals have been part of this process, held in collaboration with five major think tanks which are part of the advisory board of the National Security Division, including the think tank that I have the honor of representing. It involved politicians, it involved civil servants, it involved diplomats, it involved scholars, it involved military officers. So for the first time, all these people were brought together by the National Security Division in collaboration with these five think tanks, and they discussed all these issues in a very congenial environment. And this is hopefully going to bring about a cultural change in which the security, I think a very positive thing you must have noticed, when Army Chief talks about economy and human security, but integrity. So
the opposite areas of concern.
So actually it is a healthy sign that now instead of monologue, we have converted the policy process into a dialogue between all the processes.
That's exactly what we call brainstorming.
Absolutely. So now I think, and it is also an evidence that Pakistan is growing and evolving into a confident state. It is not shying away from publicly discussing some very important issues. And this also builds trust of the people. So this is the public process of shaping, discussing, reviewing, improving policy. So that is a very healthy sign, and inshallah this is going to be an annual feature, and due to COVID restrictions and SOPs, to see international participation from world leaders as well, hopefully, so that we can bring together this exciting and important exercise of shaping and improving our national interests in the context of national security. So I think this National Security Division has also pioneered a very important step in terms of balancing this discourse on national security between civilian institutions and military institutions. You saw the Prime Minister spoke at the National Security Dialogue. You saw the Foreign Minister spoke to this dialogue, and also the Army Chief spoke at it. So, and you saw a similar emphasis, which is also a breath of fresh air, not just on defense and territorial integrity and sovereignty, but also on human security.
Relation is something which is very positive.
Absolutely.
At the same time, if you have enough water to grow your crops, because looking at the population and the population growth of Pakistan, I think that is another very, very imminent threat also. And so forth with so many other cases. So we've also been joined in by Lieutenant General retired Talat Masood Saab. Assalamu alaikum ji.
Wa alaikum salam ji.
General Saab, thank you so much for taking out your time and talking to PTV World. Now, sir, since I believe you have also attended this particular National Security Dialogue, sir, the importance, the significance of this particular dialogue, in your point of view, sir?
I think it was very significant in the sense that you are looking at actually your defense or your security in a very comprehensive manner. And there has conception that, security is only as far as is the military is concerned. But, as has been very well elaborated by my predecessor, the one who spoke just now, that it's a very comprehensive sort of an approach which many nations have taken in the past and have really benefited from that. And what it is that you consider security, not only as your strength in the military, but also you consider that all major aspects, and especially the economy and other aspects which influence the economy of the country. And also, I would say that and for economy, you need strengthening of institutions, you need strengthening of education, you need strengthening of your health sector. And so it's a very comprehensive approach which goes deep and very wide in its approach towards sort of improving the quality of life of the people and improving the infrastructure of the country. So I think this is a very sort of an approach which would certainly enhance the potential of Pakistan, reduce friction within the country, and the best part of it is if really pursued in all earnestness, it's very likely that you might get away from continuing to sort of and those shows that if Pakistan gets strengthened by pursuing this policy over the years, then it is very likely and that it's not only likely, but it is, I'm certain about it, that Pakistan's image, Pakistan's standing in the Committee of Nations would be very high. Now, let me take one or 2 points, and these are very important.
Please.
One is that although these were discussed, but I think these need to be elaborated. When you say that economy is important, certainly it is important. It is also important that you become economically independent and not dependent on the IMF and other agencies. So how do you become economically independent? You become economically independent, of course, by pursuing infrastructure, good sort of a communication infrastructure, and also spread over years of sort of a pursuit of a certain goal. It is not possible to improve your economy in a matter of a year or 2 years. And then you have to develop a consensus between major political parties as to have an economic agenda which should not sort of go away the moment one government changes to another. So I think this is also very important that you have consistency and you have a common aim of your nation to improve your economy, and you know the fundamentals which really help in improving the economy of the nation. It is also important to understand that a country which is nuclear, which a country's position is so important and can be exploited to its full advantage if only its economy and its infrastructure is right and its relationship with other countries is good.
Jalsab, I totally agree with you on that. Jalsab, if you remember, sir, when before we had this National Defence University, there was this National Defence College, NDC in Pindi. I remember that normally whenever we think of the security aspect, we generally believe that this is the job of men in uniform, whether they are from Army, Navy, Air Force or police or any other particular organization. But sir, that was one place where I realized that the role of civilians is equally important. That role included the role of bureaucrats, educationists, people who specialize in certain fields and areas. Sort of now we have got so many other think tanks and people who are running them. Jalsab, if you allow me, we have been joined in by Ambassador Ali Sarwar Naqvi Sahab, who is also a part of this dialogue. Hello. Sir, we'll be talking to him in a little bit, but before that, sir, if I may put this question to you, sir. Jalsab mentioned about the educational side. brilliant educated lot is much more important than non-educated, no matter what. Healthy nation, as I earlier talked about. He said good in communication. Future is all about this. Look at those satellites. Now we understand the importance. People are talking about space war now. Then you talk about certain organizations which should be profit generating and which should be actually doing their job at an optimum level. Then you talk about security of so many other aspects. Food. That is where we do lack, sir, unfortunately. Two areas are totally taken care of. But the rest of those areas, unfortunately, which were managed by these civilians, it's a very bad approach to say so, but unfortunately, those areas have been neglected, sir. Nothing has been done so far. So at one end, if you do whatever you can in your given capacity and you end up giving your 100%, but if there is a weakness on the other side, sir, it is back to square one. Your take?
Absolutely. I think as Jansab also pointed out, let me just reiterate the major outcome or takeaway of this 2-day-long exercise of Islamabad Security Dialogue. What came out clearly is that Pakistan has a strong military. Pakistan is a nuclear power. But at the same time, Pakistan needs a safe environment. And Pakistani nation needs good governance so that not only all the opportunities and resources are optimally and efficiently and fairly utilized for the welfare of the people, for the prosperity of the nation, but also to ensure that our adversaries and enemies do not exploit the gaps in our governance system on the pretext of hybrid warfare. Because hybrid warfare cannot succeed unless there is a gap between state and the nation. There is a deficit of trust based on bad governance. So the best way in that is represented. But essentially we are talking about the social contract between the governed and the governors. So the government and the governed needs to trust each other. They do not need to be suspicious of each other.
And what is the level of trust? What did you calculate?
And that is exactly, I think this Islamabad Security Dialogue is a very important step in that direction, that we are discussing and debating and reviewing security aspects publicly, and the nation and the military leadership and the diplomatic leadership and the national political leadership is trying to convince the scholars, the people, the think tanks, that what is their approach, what are the challenges, and it's a collective effort that how we can collectively build a safer, prosperous, healthier. I think very positive that not only that it's about the government or the army or our weapons, the discourse has gone beyond that.
And Ali, you have mentioned a very important area. And you know, interestingly, just like a human body, there are various organs.
Yes.
All the organs are equally important, whether it's the brain or the heart, the kidneys, the liver, lungs for that matter. So even if you have a great brain and a perfect heart, but if your lungs are not functioning well, the body is at risk.
I mean,
so this is what
you come from a family of doctors. You would know a person can die out of illness or any malfunction of any particular organ.
Exactly.
So the state is like that. It has, it needs health, it needs wealth, it needs stability, it needs power,
a balance
it
of
needs
all them.
identity, it needs only that. We are
get the
beginning to
optimum
realize that it's not just power. We became a nuclear power in 1998. But we need to be healthy, we need to be stable, we need to be prosperous, and we need to be a happy nation. And we need to be confident, and the world should look at it as
if you have food security, if your economy is doing well, people are
Yes.
happy, people are healthy, people are educated.
Absolutely.
Yes, then you can get the maximum productivity out of those.
Absolutely.
You know, Ali, if you allow me, sir, we've been joined in by the Executive Director of CISS, Ambassador Ali Sarwar Naqvi Saab. Assalamu alaikum. Naqvi Saab, assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me, sir? Yeah, Naqvi Saab, if you could speak a little louder, sir. I can't hear you properly. Yeah, a lot better now, sir. Ali Saab, first of all, Naqvi Sahab, thank you so much for taking out your time and talking to PTV World. Now, sir, to tell about your thoughts about what you learned, what you had to share at that particular forum, sir.
Hello?
Yeah, ji. Naqvi Sahab.
Hello?
Naqvi Sahab, can you hear me, sir? Hello?
Yeah, I didn't hear your question. Can you repeat it, please?
I will definitely repeat it, sir. What I'm saying is that since you were a part of this very important national security dialogue that was held in Islamabad, I'm asking you about your point of view regarding that, sir. What did you learn and what you had to share at that particular Nobel Forum, sir?
Well, as you know, this was the conference, the dialogue was addressed by the Prime Minister as well as by the speakers on each day of the two-day session. And the foreign policy contours of Pakistan's entire thinking on international issues and all major regional issues was laid out by these two dignitaries. And then there was a very thorough and exhaustive discussion on the specific issues like India-Pakistan relations, Afghanistan, the Middle East, the Afghan situation particularly. So I learned a lot because, many of these issues were highlighted and very, very me on thinking at the moment in regard to each matter. Now, on India-Pakistan, for example, the two chief speakers, principal speakers, the Prime Minister and the Chief of Army Staff, both expressed an interest in resumption of some kind of discussion with our neighbor, despite all our reservations and particularly our concerns about Kashmir. They want the two sides to engage. And this comes in the wake of the LOC ceasefire, which is a revival actually of the 2003 ceasefires used to take place across borders. Now, that is one. On Afghanistan, Pakistan's role in bringing the Taliban and the U.S. on the negotiating table, Pakistan has played a fairly significant role, and Pakistan therefore wants that there should be a negotiated settlement of Afghan issue of the peace and stability of Afghanistan between all the major stakeholders. So now Pakistan feels that if this process is somehow effective, then the Afghan situation will be a matter of concern for all the principal players in the region. And now Russia is holding the conference of intra-Afghan negotiations, and Moscow is expressing keen interest. So all this is happening at this time, Faisal.
All right. Thank you very much for your comments, Naqvi Sahab. Thank you so much once again. Now, Jal Sahab, if you could hear me properly, sir. I hope you can, sir. Jal Talat, can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you.
Yeah, Jal Sahab, talking about the, the statements issued by the Chief of Army Staff, obviously exactly what you are the key. But, sir, there was a time that I would say about 30, 40 years ago, even when you were also serving as a 3-star general, Jal Sahab, the security paradigm was primarily, was more about the internal and external security. Sir, things have changed. Now, the dynamics have changed. The power of USSR was amazing, the kind of firepower they had, the kind of nuclear weapons they had. but their economy was weak, sir. So what happened? It collapsed. It collapsed, and eventually so many countries were formed later. Now, my point is, sir, that I believe this is not only for those countries who are having cold wars with the other superpowers, but even a country like Pakistan, sir, look at our population. We're the fifth, sixth number in that, 220 million people. Young population, sir, and it is believed that the population is talking about taking the dividends of this democracy, and at the same time, if you're doing the proper SWOT analysis, you're also looking at the kind of threats posed to them also, because if they are not educated, they are not healthy, they do not have jobs, there is no employment, they're not generating enough money, they're non-productive citizens. In that case, that typical demographic dividend would turn out to be an absolute demographic disaster. General Saab, your take on that?
What you have said, I fully agree with it. The point is that we have no doubt some very essential things which we could be very proud of. For instance, what you said was we have a very dynamic young, population. And I think if I'm not wrong, more than about 70% of the... So you have a very young population at this moment. But unfortunately, we also have a very large percentage of population which is uneducated, which hasn't gone to schools. It has been deprived of going to schools because of poverty and because of lack of, sufficient number of institutions or schools, as I would say, and then also the quality of education is extremely important. The emphasis on science and technology, that is very important in the present world. So I think these factors, we will have to focus on them also very much so. And no one should expect that all this could happen overnight. But if we have a comprehensive plan and really have done, we could rapidly transform Pakistan into a very dynamic country, which it deserves, its people deserve, its location deserves, and the mission for which Pakistan was created can also be fulfilled. Now, there are also some very positive aspects which have been mentioned also, but I would like to add to that, like your geostrategic position in this area. But all these can only be positive provided you have something to offer. Like, for instance, if your infrastructure is not up to the mark, if you have nothing to export, if the quality of goods is not good, then obviously, the infrastructure is not there and your quality is also not comparable, then you are not of the very qualities that can be so helpful as we talked about, infrastructure, your location and so on, can just be extremely detrimental, as we witnessed during from 2000 to the Afghan conflict and so on and so forth. They had some very adverse impact on Pakistan. And also we have to see that the policies that are made in Pakistan are also by consensus, and deep thought goes into it, because we have pursued policies in the past which have had a very detrimental impact or effect on Pakistan's social structure, its economy, and also the question of madrasas, to improve the quality of madrasas, to improve the quality. They were so unfortunate that they did not have sufficiently good education as to be somewhat responsible and productive citizens of this country. So
Correct,
I
sir.
think the fault doesn't lie with them, but it is our responsibility.
Primarily
to
the
ensure
system, the overall functions of the system, sir. I think that is
I think
the crucial
you
area.
need a very comprehensive approach and a sustained approach about all the issues that we talked about. And it's easy to talk about them, but to implement them requires extremely good governance, great, foresight and foresight. So I think it's a combination of several things. You need leadership at several levels with a mission. I have witnessed countries like China and Korea and others right from 1966, because I've been going there, and you won't believe it, that and the way that they have transformed themselves is a miracle, especially what China has done to itself. And also, I would say even the other countries.
So taking
have
out 700 million people out of the poverty,
out of poverty.
it's not a joke.
So yeah, and can you imagine that when I went to China in 1966, there were hardly any cars. Everyone was on a cycle or were, on foot. And now there are thousands and thousands of cars and buildings and hotels and so on and so forth. And of course, the way that the people have prospered, you have so many millionaires there. All 40 years, China has transformed itself into a. But at the same time, I mean, you have to understand the amount of sacrifices that they have made, the amount of perseverance that their leaders have shown, the amount of it was a missionary zeal that they had. It's not so easy to sort of implement that. And every country has its own system. Ours is a very different system. So you will have to adapt. You can't adapt those systems. You have to sort of work in your system. But yet you can achieve a lot. As I said, look at South Korea, for instance. Look at many other countries, even Thailand.
Brilliant examples. Even countries in the Middle East, General Saab.
Yeah.
Countries
Well,
like
I'm
UAE,
not
for
so
that
impressed
matter,
by the
or
Middle
Qatar,
East countries.
Kuwait, though they
That is true, oil money, and they are spending it very wisely. But at the same time, I think we have to really look at countries which are democratic, which have progressed, like Vietnam, like South Korea, like other countries, even Singapore, although it's not truly, you can't evaluate Singapore because it's a very small.
It's kind of a big city or a small country, you can put it this way.
Small,
But
yeah.
Jal Saab, thank you so much for your comments, sir. What a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much once again. Now coming back to you, Ali. Talking about globalization, information and connectivity, I think the national security varies from decade to decade. Now, sir, as earlier I put this question to Jan Saab that, when there was this fantastic one, because when you talk about the national security, normally you always end up seeing a retired Lieutenant General looking after, whether it's General Danjua or General Asif, and you name it, yes. There's so many. But sir, seeing the current NSA of Pakistan, Mohd Yusuf Saab, young man, dynamic man, educated man, yes, looking after the affairs, and I think looking after them really well. Now, one thing, sir, during the last 2 decades, post 9/11, let me put it this way, sir, the dynamics, everything has changed. Yes. I think corruption, when we talk about the leaders that they should have vision, they shouldn't be thinking about the next election rather than thinking about the next generation. But sir, that's not the case, unfortunately. Do you think, sir, leads to bad governance, leads to wrong decision making, and eventually is much bigger threat posed to your country as compared to the climate change that is beyond your control, sir? Only Allah can look after that. You can do very little. But sir, this factor, don't you think is really important?
I think corruption is a very important issue, and I think
you talked about the trust deficit,
I
sir.
also brought it out in the last session because there was a repeated emphasis that Pakistan is considering a more geo-economic approach rather than a geostrategic approach towards its foreign policy. And that is a fundamental requirement, that your ease of doing business should be, attractive for the foreign investors. It should ensure that it enjoys the confidence of your industry, your traders, to be converted competitive prices and good quality in order to compete in the globalized world. So basically, in order to conclude, the modern world, as you rightly pointed out, is more globalized than ever before. And what does that mean? That means the society, the politics, the security, the economics and the technology. It has interwoven the human society like never before on this planet. That's why the modern war is hybrid warfare, because it also affects all the domains of society. That's why you are no longer relying only on hard power, although it is very important. So
now we talk about the smart power, basically.
That's why you need initiatives like Islamabad Security Dialogue in order to ensure not only all the state and state in a manner which is not only comprehensive but also sustainable. That will ensure that we defeat the threats posed by the hybrid warfare from our adversary, and that will also build confidence between state and society. That will also attract more investment from international community and allow Pakistan to benefit from the regional connectivity which the emerging world order offers. So that's why our foreign policy, our defense policy, our economic policy, our environment policy, all these things have to be synergized so that all our elements of national power actually help us become not just a powerful nation, but also a healthy nation, a stable polity, and a safe environment.
Ali, last 1 minute plan.
It was an important part of the discussion that terrorism remains a threat, and it also requires, the realization was that despite our huge gains in the last 20 years, which are unprecedented internationally against terrorism, we also need to address the economic aspect, the ideological aspect, the education aspect.
Waziristan has been cleared from the terrorists,
and
but
the grievance,
the economic factor is the most important
and to ensure that the grievance of the people is not allowed to either grow or enough to be exploited by our adversaries. That is very important. The grievances need to be economically and politically addressed.
I think that is the key area. But since it's a huge subject, we'd like to do a couple of more shows on this, and I think we should take each and every segment separately and talk about that. But it was a pleasure having you, Ali. Thank you.
Would bring all those segments of society and getting their help for a government which could deliver to the people, peace. As you said, and I would like to refer even Prime Minister's one sentence, what he said today, that all the keys of peace are holding Afghan people and Afghanistan. So peace and security related to Afghanistan and its leadership. But leadership role was very essential. Unfortunately, they were not thinking that what should be their ideas to implement with the consent of the people. So this was the thing that they were leading all those things, you know, in a different directions. So at many places, wherever the dialogues were taking place, no matter in Doha, no matter in other countries, in Geneva or somewhere, you know, but
still, give peace a chance, because that is what suits everyone. No matter how we achieve it, but we have to. That should be the ultimate goal. But anyway, sir, thank you so much for your time. Pleasure to have always, sir, Khan Saab. And inshallah, we'll try to update our viewers on the current dialogue that is going on in Moscow. That is very important. And let's see how solutions and remedies are generated, provided it is accepted to all these stakeholders in Afghanistan. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow at 8. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.